So in this particular lecture, we'll study about philosophy of ethics. To study the philosophy behind ethics and its origin, first of all, let us understand what exactly is philosophy. Philosophy is made of the two root words philo and sophos. Philo means love and sophos means wisdom. So philosophy is essentially love of wisdom. And uh, if you would have experienced in your day-to-day life, you would have known that philosophers are someone who are considered to be very intellectual and very in-depth, having very in-depth knowledge on a subject. Actually, if you see across the disciplines, after a stage you are given a PhD degree. After your graduation and post graduation, you do a PhD degree in any subject. What have you ever wondered what is a PhD degree? PhD is nothing but Doctor of Philosophy. What does that mean? That means in any particular discipline, if you go beyond an extent, when you actually create knowledge in that subject, create certain new knowledge, that is the domain of philosophy. So how come you create that knowledge? You create it, that's why love of wisdom, you see. uh, you create those knowledge in any particular subject, uh, till an extent you study what is being explored already, right? But creating that knowledge requires you to holistically examine things, whatever is given, to analyze things, to go beyond, to question those things, right? And then you create a knowledge in that particular subject. That's why philosophy is called mother of all disciplines. In every discipline, after a stage, you get to a philosophical stage, right? That's why philosophy of physics is there, philosophy of chemistry is there, philosophy of sociology is there, philosophy of religion is there, right? So philosophy per se has a meaning of critical, evaluative, analytical, holistic, rationalistic study or inquiry of any kind of subject. Like, for example, in socio-political philosophy, you analyze and question the socio-political terms like what do you mean by liberty? What do you mean by democracy? You question these things. You actually examine the concepts of secularism, democracy, multicultural culturalism, and other social, logical, and political phenomena. Similarly, in philosophy of religion, you question about God, the existence of God, the existence of evil. How come? Um, how come you know about God, whether God truly exists or not, or any kind of religious phenomena, right? You question about faith and things like that. So any kind of rational, holistic examination is under the domain of philosophy, right? So, philosophy is largely divided into four parts: metaphysics, epistemology, logic, and ethics. Ethics is being a branch of philosophy. So, in metaphysics, we study about the theory of reality. Metaphysics, as the term indicates, it's beyond physics, right? So, what does theory of reality means? Reality, as in from time immemorial, philosophers have always inquired about what is the true nature of reality, what is the number of reality, nature of reality, as in whether it is spiritualistic or materialistic, right? Charvaka would say that material things are only real. यावत जीवेत सुखम जीवेत ऋणम कृत्वा घृतम पीवेत. मतलब जब तक जियो सुख से जियो, rin low and ghee pure, that kind of a thing. I mean, eat, drink, and be merry, right? For him, materialistic reality is only there. And for many of the philosophers, spiritualistic reality is there. Something called Brahma, something called some transcendental dental entity, like ideas of Plato or things like that. And what is the number of reality? Whether the reality is one, like Brahma, or whether the reality is two, like Mind and Body by Descartes. So these things we study in metaphysics. In epistemology, Epistemology is nothing but theory of knowledge. How come you know that thing exists? How do you know what are the sources of the knowledge? Whether that knowledge is valid or not, right? Whether that knowledge is erroneous, right? Whether you know it through senses, or whether you know it through certain books, certain verbal testimony, whether you infer that knowledge. All these kinds of thing about knowledge, knowing a particular thing through experience, through reason, all of these things you study in epistemology, right? Similarly, logic is the analytical domain in philosophy, and ethics is a part of it. Here particularly, what I'm trying to give you a sense of it is philosophy of ethics. Philosophy of ethics here just means the critical inquiry about ethics. How come ethics comes into picture? That's what I'll be trying to explain you in the next few slides. See, the it's actually the philosophy per se, and various few of the philosophies which I am going to tell you, they are essentially very rigorous and very complicated. If you go into any of the books, or if even I try you to explain these things, then it will take quite a long lecture on it. But essentially, I'm trying to explain the larger picture in a very simplistic term. So just bear with me for a while and don't get intimidated by the words. Just try and understand what I'm trying to tell you. You probably might not get it so simply in books. They have a lot of technical terminologies. So I'm just trying to give you a flair of um, ethics, philosophy of ethics, sorry. So I'll talk a bit about essentialism here. What is essentialism? See, essentialism comes from the word essence. Essence, what do you mean by essence? Essence is something common characteristic, some common characteristic of any particular thing, right? Like for example, a knife. What is the essence of a knife? The blade of the knife is the essence. That color could have been changed, right? The color of knife can change, that handle can change, but if supposedly that blade is removed, then it is not a knife, right? Similarly, humans have certain essence. Humanism is the essence of humanness, is the essence of being human, right? There are certain core characteristic which defines a human. We may be male, we may be female, we may be uh, taller and shorter and dark and white and whatever, but we all have a common characteristic of humanness, right? That humanness is our essence, right? So of all the things and beings, there exists certain essence, right? So all uh, all the philosophers, right from Socrates, Plato, Descartes, Hegel, even Indian philosophers like uh, Buddha, Jaina, Shankaracharya, all, all these people, they have laid quite a bit of emphasis on the essence, right? Essence part of it. As in, just try and understand what I'm trying to tell you. See, for them, humans are not important. For them, the core characteristic which makes human is important, which is beyond this human being, something beyond ourselves, right? So for Plato, this is called ideas. Ideas are nothing but this humanness, or the cowness, or the thingness, or those kind of core characteristic, these Plato called idea, which exist in certain transcendental world, right? Which is beyond this. Transcendental means beyond this world, right? Similarly, Shankaracharya talks about Brahma. Brahma is something which which is beyond, which is something human has to attain. The human, you would have heard about this term called enlightenment and things like that, moksha, nirvana. All of this is what? All of this is that human particularly is subdued, right? We have to become something. Even before our birth, there is certain idea, certain essence, which we are told to strive to achieve that thing, right? Even Descartes, I'll tell you that even Descartes, who is a father of modern philosophy, he has also emphasized a lot on, he has given the principle of cogito ergo sum. Cogito ergo sum, he has said, cogito ergo sum means I think therefore I am, right? Very famous line. You would see it in many books. I think therefore I am. That means that if someone, if someone is thinking, someone is thinking, then who is thinking? He has laid that emphasis that there is certain, that's why he derives from this line, I think therefore I am. That who is thinking that there is something called soul, there is something called, from that soul he derives God and then world and things like that. But even he has laid emphasis on this essence. Similarly, Hegel has talked about absolute idea. There is something called absolute, in which comprises the whole world, all the human, everything is going towards that absolute idea that is all encompassing, right? So all of these Indian and Western philosophers, they have laid quite a bit of emphasis on something very transcendental beyond this world. Maybe that is called Brahma by someone, that is called moksha, that is called God, or that is something which is beyond human, right? And humans are nothing but mere copy, mere, they are very much, as in I would say, inferior to that idea or that higher reality. So all of these philosophers, they are looking out for certain abstract entity. All of these things are abstract. See, even I'm finding problems in explaining or expressing you, because these things itself are abstract things, and people would try to become that thing over the period of their lifetime, right? So these philosophers, they have laid quite a bit of emphasis on essence, right? Essence is nothing but abstract transcendental entity, which I said a common characteristics of being and things. And because of, as told you, that because uh, even before our birth this essence is predetermined, so our freedom is limited. It undermines human beings in itself. And uh, because see, if at all, just to give you an example, supposedly you create a pottery, a person, a potter creates a pottery, and he has that archetype in mind, he has that prototype of that pottery in mind, right? That pottery would be the shape of the pottery, the color of the that pottery and things like that. So uh, just imagine, just take it analogically for a human. If there is something called God who creates this human, right? So he has the essence of human in mind. He would give a limited freedom to the humans, right? So essentially human beings are not free according to these this essentialism principle, right? And essentialism is not per se any philosophy, but this is one of the running themes in all these philosophers over the period of time, what you could deduce, right? Now, this has been going right from Socrates. I mean, see, right, Socrates was in some BC, and till very recently, Descartes and all are in 17th, 18th century, right? So, till very this current period, this essentialist phenomena has been going in philosophy, right? Then in the 20th century, there is a philosopher by the name of Husserl. He devised a methodology called phenomenology, right? Phenomenology is, you can call it a method, or it's a philosophy per se. See, phenomenology is something, he says, that the true phenomenon, he Husserl, he lays emphasis on the true phenomenon is seeing things as they are, right? Seeing things as they are means what? According to Husserl, when in knowing anything, when we analyze anything, we have certain external and internal limitations in us. We have certain pre-assumptions, right? Pre-assumptions or prejudices, you can learn it, you have that knowledge given through book or from someone, or over a period of time you have this thing, that this particular thing would be of this type, right? So over the period of time in philosophy, we, due to this essence what I told you earlier, we have this thing that there is something called transcendental, and human beings are just a mere copy, they are mere image, right? So they are not very great, right? So Husserl devised this uh, idea of phenomenology, in which you study any particular thing without any presupposition, right? It is a philosophical method for investigating the phenomenon. Here means the true nature of things, right? How a particular thing is, how a particular object is, how a particular study is, right? How a particular human is, how a particular pen is. You know it without any presupposition, without any initial psychological or beliefs you would be having. Just remove all those beliefs, and then you see it as it is, right? To know the true nature of things, right? So this particular method is free from all kinds of presuppositions. Presupposition as in, there could be presupposition which are of two types, psychological and naturalistic. Means that you could have certain pre-assumptions which is made inside you. Supposedly a very simple example could be that certain individual, you would have had a kind of prejudice in your mind towards that particular person, right? That is internal to you, right? And certain his external features, what they convey, that is the naturalistic belief, right? So phenomenology emphasizes on removing all these kinds of presuppositions and knowing the things or the object or the person or the study or even the philosophy as it is, right? So this is done through a process of phenomenological reduction. You don't have to remember the terms, I'm just telling you the process, right? Knowing the thing as they are, removing all presupposition, that is done through this process of phenomenological reduction, which means removing all the external and internal biases, removing all these kinds of psychological and naturalistic beliefs, right? This is again a technical thing, I'm just telling you, to know the things as they are, you need to remove all the presuppositions. This particular method was used by a very contemporary school of philosophy, or it's not exactly philosophy, it's a kind of movement, because there have been a lot of thinkers in this school, like Nietzsche, Sartre, Kierkegaard, Albert Camus, and many, many, many others. Right? They have their thinking. They have given theorized in altogether different terms and different line of thinking. Every philosopher has a different line of thinking in even in existential school. But one of the uh, spirit of existentialism, main spirit of existentialism, is it is against essentialism. Essentialism was laying emphasis on essence, right? Subduing the actual human being, right? But existentialism says that existence of human being is more primary, right? First human being is there, and then his essence or what his purpose is. Essentialism used to say that God has made, or certain uh, abstract entity has made human, and that even before human being is born, his purpose is decided. But uh, existentialist philosophers don't believe in all this. They employ the method of phenomenology. They remove all these presuppositions that have been going throughout this ages in philosophy, and they they basically conclude that human beings first of all exist. First of all, they take birth, they exist, and existence here, existence is not merely the English word existing, existing as in lying there. Existence here means emerging out. Existence here means man is not mechanical, as they would have told, essentialists would have told that they are mainly copy, right? So, existentialism, as I said, is the contemporary movement. It's more popularized after the Second World War by the theorists like Sartre, Kierkegaard, Heidegger, Albert Camus, Nietzsche, and the likes of that. So, these people, they have applied the method of phenomenology on essentialism, as I told you, that removing all the presuppositions of earlier philosophers. For these people, existence precedes essence. As essentialist philosophers, for them, first of all, there was essence, and then man came into being, right? For these philosophers, first of all, man exists, first of all, human beings exist, and then they define their purpose. Then, first of all, they exist as in existence with man is not a mechanical being. Man exists with all his feelings, with all his emotions, which was initially subdued or undermined in essentialist perspective. But here, these philosophers laid quite a bit of emphasis on existence of man with all his feelings and emotions intact, with all his problems intact, and these people believe that man in turn determines his own purpose. He creates his own purpose, right? At any point of time, man can re-emerge and redefine his own being, right? So they believe that essentially they believe in sense of subjectivity. Every person, every human being is different, and he defines his own purpose, his own. So, as I said, for these philosophers, existence precedes any kind of essence. First of all, human exists along with his feelings and emotions, and then he defines his own purpose, right? What he's going to be. That's why there's a popular saying that man, these existentialists say that man is not what he is, but what he is not. That means that what is his present state is not going to determine what he is going to be, right? So first of all, he exists, and then he defines, he re-emerges, he uh, uh, actually creates his own value, what he wants to be, right? For material things, uh, these people say that for material things essence is there before existence, because there is a kind of prototype uh, behind any material things. When anyone makes certain material things, a chair or something like that, so for it prototype is there in the mind of the person who makes it, right? So that limits that particular thing. But a human being is completely free, right? For them, these existentialists, freedom and choice are the two most important virtues bestowed upon human beings, right? Sartre has said somewhere that man is not only free but he is condemned to be free, as in that they believe in the limitlessness of human beings, right? They believe that in any particular situation of life, a, a particular person has the freedom to choose a particular path, right? People would say that in this particular circumstances, and due to this particular situation, due to this particular individual, they had to choose this thing. But then uh, Sartre goes on to say that even in that particular case, you are choosing to be governed by those circumstances or that particular person, right? If someone says that I am doing this particular thing because my father says it, right? So that means that you are choosing to go by your father's wishes, right? So this was just an example, as in these philosophers lay quite a bit of emphasis on freedom and choice. For them, human beings is first of all there, and then and he is bestowed upon all kinds of freedom, and as he is free, he has to have a quite a bit of responsibility because he's free, and he's free to make a choice. So these particular existentialists, they give a lot of emphasis on the problems of these human beings, which could be despair, angst, boredom, and death, etc. So these philosophers, Heidegger, Sartre, all of them, they basically emphasize on the authentic living. They say that a person should move from inauthentic life to authentic life. What do you mean by authenticism? Here, authenticism, they means that a person should live uh, uh, in coherence with his own nature. He should know that he should not waste time in gossiping. He should not waste time in impressing someone else. He should not waste time in trying to behave what he is not, right? He should know what he or she is, and then he should behave authentically according to his or her nature, right? Because at the end of it, Heidegger has very popularly said the forgetfulness of being, in which he says that man is forgotten to be alive, man is forgotten that he is free, and man has forgotten that all the beings are connected. What does he mean? He means that uh, he means in that man is forgotten to be alive means that man is so busy in this world, in the rush of uh, getting something, some materialistic desire, some achievement, or impressing someone else, that he actually forgets the true nature of himself or herself. He says that when you are lonely, when you are at times when you are diseased, then you get to know, you are close to yourself, what you are, you then get to know, right? That Heidegger has said that that is your true nature. And once he has also popularly laid emphasis on spending time near the graveyard, because he says that everyone, be it high or low, everyone has to is rushing towards his death, right? So he says that once you know that you have to go to this graveyard, so you would realize to live authentically in your life. Sartre has given an example of waiter in this case, that that particular waiter, when he is behaving in a way to lean before his customers and behaving uh, in a very inappropriate way, in the sense that he's trying to be what he is not actually. He is a human being first of all, and then he's a waiter and things like that. So he has given quite a bit of examples when and he has quoted this term called bad faith, in the sense that people who are not living their authentic self, right? So all in all, this existentialist philosophers, they lay quite a bit of emphasis on the human beings, their freedom, their choice, their emotions, like boredom, the despair and things like that. And they emphasize on authentic living, right? So you can see that uh, this philosophy has moved from essentialism to existentialism, bringing the truth, the real nature, from certain transcendental entity to this world, to human beings, right? Through the use of phenomenology. Now, when this existentialist gave emphasis on human beings, then comes the philosophy of humanism. What is humanism? Humanism is the philosophy about human beings, right? The famous line of Protagoras is, man is the measure of all things, right? Man is the center, human beings are the center, and human has a very special thing endowed, right? uh, from his birth itself, that is reasoning, right? Over the period of time, that reasoning develops, that is altogether a different matter. But rather than relying on certain transcendental entities, certain god or certain abstract phenomena, this particular philosophy says that human beings, by applying their own reason, they can self actualize, they can move from their potentiality to actuality. What does that mean? That every human has the potential to actualize what he can be. A seed has, for example, a seed has the potential to actualize into a tree, right? So it's a human centric philosophy, and they believe that rationality can lead to self actualization. For these kind of philosophers, human dignity is very important. As the person is born, he has certain kind of natural human rights, right? And that's why the dignity of individual is very much emphasized here. You can see it in our practical lives. Even if the person has done heinous of the crimes, he has the right to being heard. Why? Because of that principle of natural justice. And how does it come? It comes from the principle of humanism. After all, he is a human, and being a human, he has certain rights, certain uh, dignity endowed in him, right? You cannot treat a human like a mere object or animals or things like that, right? So dignity is of a human is very important, right? So after all of this existentialism, knowing about existentialism, humanism, human centric philosophy, when choice and freedom of humans is very important. Now you have studied ethics by now, that ethics is all about choice, ethics is about others, ethics is about reasoning, ethics is about humans, right? We have heard the scope of ethics, in which knowledge, voluntariness, free will is there, right? So all of these even will study about democracy, liberty, equality, fraternity, justice, secularism, and ethics. All of these are humanistic principles. What I'm trying to gather your attention to is that this ethics per se is first of all there was something called essentialism, on which phenomenology was applied. Then existentialism came into being, and from existentialism humanism came into picture. And ethics per se as a subject is a human centric philosophy. It's about the choice, it's about uh, the dignity of individual, it's about the larger harmony in society, right? So and for that the ethical principles are laid down. So we'll be dealing a lot of philosophers and thinkers, but this was a mere introduction to the philosophy behind ethics. Okay, thank you.